All right, good evening. I believe we are live and ready to go on this Wednesday, this frigid Wednesday evening, as we continue in our second installment of Career Changers Conversation, where we have the opportunity here at KCTR to present a series that's focused on the transition from a specific professional career um, to the teaching profession. And we're very excited about this. We know there's numerous individuals who are contemplating this move into the teaching profession. So what we want to do is be able to have the opportunity for individuals who's done that before to share their insight and some of the things that's gone into their decision-making process to make this jump. So this evening we have with us Rita, who, and I shared previously, this is presented by KCTR. However, for example, our last one, we will have a teacher who's not a part of KCTR, so because we want to share different viewpoints. However, Rita is a member of the Kansas City Teacher Residency Pass, and we're excited to have her join us this evening. How are you doing this evening, Rita?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good, good. Well, we're happy that you're able to join us this evening as we discuss and talk about, as I said, many things that go into um, making that transition. So I guess we'll start this evening with give you the opportunity to share a little bit about yourself. What are you doing now, and things of the sort.
Right, I am a fifth grade science teacher right now. And before I was a teacher, I was a full-time scientist. That's what I had trained for, that's what I did before going into education.
All right. So when you say you were a scientist, I'm intrigued a little bit. When you say you were a scientist, what were you doing? Like when you say scientist, what does that entail?
So
Like,
I
were you in the lab, like with like you see on TV with the dials and mixing stuff? What were you doing?
Exactly. I was in the lab and I was mixing stuff and there were machines with dials and beeps and lights. And so I was a cancer researcher.
Okay.
So I helped try to come up with new medicines and understand how the body responds or does not respond
Oh wow.
to a cancer. Um, and then just the role of bacteria in our bodies and how that keeps us healthy or not, and during treatment, and does the bacteria break down the medicine? And so those were the kind of things that I did.
So now that you said that, I don't even know if I want to keep talking about teaching. I actually kind of might want to talk about this medicine stuff. Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually, kind of hearing that. And I'm actually now, it'd be interesting down, when we talk a little bit later, I'm curious about your students when they kind of learned a little bit about what you used to do, if there was anything about that. But that's pretty exciting, though. And not only that, but thank you for the work that you were doing as we continue to research and battle cancer. But now you're a teacher.
Mhm.
Why did you want to become a teacher?
Well, I've done research for a number of years, and I um, ended up working for a large pharmaceutical research corporation and feeling kind of unfulfilled. I loved the purpose of the work and being a scientist, and on paper everything was going well. The pay was great, and I was working in a job that I had trained for, but something felt kind of empty, and there's a lot of isolation as a scientist sometimes, and I just I started kind of soul searching, like, okay, well, what part of my career made me the happiest? And I kept coming back to being at the university and mentoring students and being around students and teaching. And so I kind of pursued that more and started talking to people. Um, and um, through that search, I had found out that there's a sort of lack of um, science teachers, and especially really um, science teachers who have a strong background in science. And so someone had heard about KCTR and they had told me about it, and I'd not heard about it before, and I looked into it, and I um, got in contact with Andy, I believe, from KCTR, and he gave me more information, and one thing led to another, and that's kind of what started the path. I guess there was a feeling that something was missing, and um, kind of a lack of fulfillment and a wanting to be with students. And so that it was a windy path, but it led me to where I am today.
So that's interesting. So yeah, I heard you say one thing I'm going to touch on real quick. So were you already previously aware then, even prior to jumping into it, kind of the shortage in the science teaching arena?
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. And as you said, that is a common teacher shortage area, and not just in Kansas City, but around the country. And anytime we can get individuals who were that deep into the science profession is pretty um, is a pretty good get for the education profession. So you said you kind of did some soul searching and you start kind of going through the process. And you said you hadn't heard about the Kansas City Teacher Residency, but what other were you searching other outlets or other avenues to become a certified teacher, and what kind of went into your process of determining which route was going to be the best one for you personally?
Yeah. So, of course, yeah, I always kind of looked into other routes as well, and for certification and even masters in education, but it was just very difficult to do while having a full-time job that was kind of demanding. Some programs had night classes, but then my hours, depending on the project, sometimes I was on a night shift, and sometimes I was on a day shift, or you'd have to go in and um, get samples at 2 a.m. or something. So it's it was just not possible to do something while working full time. And what was really appealing about KCTR was that there was an internship, there was some money towards getting a master's in education along with your training for certification. And so, and the idea that you would be you'd be working full time as a student, but also getting practical training at a school with a mentor. I didn't see that in other programs. I saw a lot with education and taking classes, but not that support over the years with a coach as well. So there were just many things that were unique about KCTR that was really appealing. So
So personally, did you come up with a timeline on when you wanted to try to make that decision by, or was it just kind of all fluid throughout the process? Or, how long did it take you to come to the decision that becoming a teacher is what I really want to do?
yeah, it I don't know, maybe half a year, maybe. I don't know. It was a couple of months. I knew I really wanted to do something different and be with students, and I wasn't quite sure what level that would look like. What grade I would be teaching, and um, there was actually quite a bit of pushback from some of the scientists saying that I'd be tossing away my career if I taught young kids, as opposed to graduate students. And but I didn't. At some point you have to listen to your own heart and kind of decide what is there a calling, is there not, or who's the most in need for the education and where can you fit in. So um, I ended up also kind of talking to my husband, and because it would be a big switch with our family income as well, and so I talked it over with him, um, and he was extremely supportive and said, "Well, I want you to be happy, and you're not, and you're working so hard, and for what, He's like, it's okay. So like we have enough. We'll make do." And so that was kind of a green light, I guess, so to speak, so that it was in my hands if that was something I wanted to do, and I really felt that it was that it was time to still be in science, but then have something that I was hoping would be more more personally fulfilling.
That is awesome. If you're just joining us, this is Vernon Birmingham, the Talent and Placement Manager with Kansas City Teacher Residency, joined this evening by Rita. Rita is a science teacher. What grade did you say again?
Fifth grade.
Fifth grade science teacher, and I might have missed this earlier. And how long have you been teaching?
I've been teaching. This is my third year, I guess.
Third. Okay, so Rita's third year as a science teacher, and Rita previously was a scientist. If you missed that, and she made the transition into becoming a teacher. Her reason she stated was a little bit of lack of fulfillment and things at that time. So we're excited to spend some time with her this evening as she shares what it looked like for her personally to transition from one career to another one, which is now the teaching profession. So Rita, the next, you made mention of a few things. Of course, there's going to be a big change in regard to your income level, whatnot. But what other reservations or fears, if any, did you have in making this decision? Like, was there anything that kept coming into your head that made you say, "Do I really want to do this?" And and I know you made some mentions of some other scientists saying you would throw away your career, and that maybe was a piece. But were there any other reservations you had in really deciding like this is what I'm going to do,
um, not
or any
a
fears?
Yeah, not a reservation exactly, but just kind of there's a lot of isolation as a scientist. So yes, you share your ideas and you're generally on a team and you go to conferences and things like that, but you're not it's not like a particularly social job, or at least my exact profession was not. And so making the switch from being um that kind of job, I guess, where you are working with samples at a bench. Maybe you're teaching someone how to use a machine, but that's pretty much it, to being around people all day, and talking and being a model, whether it's intentional or not. I was just wondering, how will this switch be? Because I'm generally a little introverted and a little bit shy, which is not rare for a scientist. And so to make that switch to something that is very much in front of people and interacting with young kids, teaching science, yes, but as a teacher, you're also teaching how to handle emotions, how to study. I don't know. There's a lot of like a huge social aspect to um, teaching teaching young people. And so I was not necessarily scared, but I was curious and just wondering how to do that well, because it was something that was not necessary in my first career, honestly. So
No, that's good because that is a something that individuals may think about, but I wonder how often they truly think about that aspect of it. Someone who is naturally um, an introvert, who has to transition into where you're in front of people every day, your interaction with teachers every day, building leaders every day, and that's a piece I don't know how often really individuals really think about that, how that shift in itself is going to play within this change. You think about all the other things like income and things like that, but that is a tough move for someone who's naturally an introvert, where every day now you're in front of 15 to 20 kids per hour, if not more, and have to do that every day. I mean, it might even get exhausting for you at times.
sometimes, but I've found that the students generally have so much energy that they give you energy too, and once you build those relationships, then it's uh, generally a pretty positive experience. And so I guess my advice would be um, not necessarily just scientists, but if you're an introverted person, that at least for me, it's still very fulfilling, and that's not something that should stop you. Because if you love teaching and you love, or you think you might, and want to pass on your knowledge, and um, it's like there's so many strengths. You're teaching students who are all different kinds of people. So you also need to show the introverts to be that there are times when you can, step out and interact with everyone. And so you, yeah, it's not, um, I don't know. I guess that you have it shouldn't be something that stops you. It's not a weakness. It's just part of who you are, where you get your energy from. So if you're an introvert, then you're around people all day, then just make sure that you have some time to yourself, maybe in the evening, where you can kind of get that kind of recharge, I guess.
So do you still consider yourself an introvert?
I think so. I mean, yeah, that's the baseline. That's the
Okay.
baseline.
I was like, you'll be amazing. Like after a few years now, you're just like talking to everybody all the time now. It's just from being in the classroom um, every day. So again, if you're joining us, if you have any questions yourself, feel free to toss it in the chat. I'm trying to go back to the comment section, not the chat. And I'm trying to check it here and there. But what made you finally, say, let's do it. Let's take this jump.
um, I'm not sure, but I remember that I was having some trepidation. I wasn't quite sure. I had been accepted, and then I was thinking about, well, maybe I should hold it off one more year and just have that one more year of like extra pay. That's a pretty high level, and then I was just talking it over with my husband and thinking through it, and I'm like, why would I wait? Because I already know that this is what I want to do, and the door is right there. It's wide open, and so just if you're gonna do it, just leap. And so I'm not exactly sure deeper than that. I think there wasn't just, one moment. It was like I knew in my heart that it's what I wanted, and so then I'm like, why am I holding back then? So then I contacted KCTR, and I said, yes, I would like to join this year, because they had told me that they would still honor my acceptance, that I could wait a year if I wanted to. But I called them back and said, no, I'm ready. Let's do it. And so and I was really glad that I did. I met some really close friends in my cohort, and that I wouldn't have been close to otherwise. So it worked out really, really well.
That's cool. So if you're just joining us, you kind of met. So Rita earlier was talking about how her previous career as a scientist meant a lot of, you know, working solo on, particular things, sitting at a stool, sitting on a stool at a table working on something. So, with that being said, knowing your background and what you were doing, what expectations or what did you expect going in that first year? And not only that, but how did those expectations you have, how did they align with reality once you got into the teaching profession?
Yeah, not at all. I think I didn't really have, I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but whatever it was not reality. I think I didn't quite realize, and this may depend on the age that you teach and everything, but just how much of teaching your content that you're teaching, so science or math or English, that's critical, but that's still a relatively small part of your job. You are a parent. You're teaching discipline. You're modeling it. You there are situations, small to big, that you didn't expect to do that day, like telling someone to please stop licking the window and to please sit in their seat, are things that you're not. That's not like an expectation if you have not been in education and have not been a young child for a while. So um, it's yeah, I think my expectations were, I don't know that I really had any, but they were certainly not reality. With I was hoping that there would be fulfillment, and that students could have a love of science, and that hopefully they would enjoy my teaching style, and that I would grow. And that is true. But there were also just the reality of switching careers and being a beginner again, when I had been kind of like a manager essentially at my job. You know, I had risen up the ranks in the science world. And so to be in a job where I did not have years of experience and did not have um, skills at teaching young children, um, that was kind of hard too. There's a learning curve, and to really voice your thoughts and your actions is also kind of a skill that you need to gain. And so those, yeah, I didn't. I guess what I'm telling you are things that I didn't expect, but that are an important part of the job and sort of growing as an educator.
Cool. So I don't know if I asked you this, but how long were you a scientist before switching over into the teaching profession?
Um, Over 10 years.
Yeah, okay.
So it was it all of my career. Like basically I started in college working in a labs while I was getting my education, and then that turned into a full-time job, and
Okay.
then I worked at universities, and then eventually in the corporate world as a scientist. So um, that was my only career, yeah, before going into teaching. So
So
it was over a decade.
okay, so we're speaking over a decade of time as a scientist. And if you're just joining us, welcome. This is Vernon, the talent and placement manager at KCTR, in our second segment or second installment of Career Changers Conversation. And we have Rita with us this evening. Rita is a teacher now for 3 years, fifth grade science teacher who spent over a decade as a scientist. And I'm talking about in the lab with the lab coat on, mixing some, doing some research under the microscope, all of that type of stuff, scientists, which is pretty cool in itself. But she's been a teacher now for a few years. And talk about your first year as a teacher. Do you have anything in particular that sticks out that you can think of that you kind of hold dear to your heart?
Um, yeah, the first year taught me a lot. It was really rough. I also um was so my first year alone in the classroom without a mentor. I had just had a baby, and so apart from has so I was supposed to kind of start the year with the kids and then have a maternity leave and then return and finish out the year. The baby came early, 2 days before the school year started. So we were in the hospital with the baby, and so the year was not starting out as planned. Um, so what ended up happening was that when I went into teaching that year after my maternity leave, the students had already had kind of a couple different subs. They had one sub for a while who's a long-term sub, but I hadn't met them yet. I think briefly. Um, I had come in for just a couple of days to meet them before I would come back as a teacher, and they had heard my name and people had talked about me. But when I entered into the classroom, it was partway through the year. It was a couple months into the year, and so the students didn't really know me. They were kind of behind in science, and had not had any tests or quizzes or anything, and so but had formed a bond with one of their substitute teachers, and so it was pretty rough. It was a very unusual start to the year, because when I came in, then they were starting to have graded assignments, and so it was a big switch for them that they had sort of gotten close to one substitute teacher, and then now they have a new adult and all these expectations, and so it was kind of an uphill battle a little bit, and so that made things difficult on top of the having a newborn who was sleeping maybe 2 hours at a time and would need to eat throughout the night. So I didn't have a lot of sleep and was kind of entering into my first year partway through the school year. But with that being said, um, the the parts that were hard at first were building that relationship and that trust, and the kids were very like curious about me and my life as a scientist, and the science part was okay, but knowing what to do if students had strong emotions and how to kind of de-escalate things, or if there's one student made a comment and then would hurt another student. Just kind of the social aspect of teaching was the hardest part for me that first year. Um, and um, but eventually by the end of the year it was going sort of as I had dreamed it would, a little bit more. But the first year was rough. I was exhausted and feeling like I wasn't doing a good job necessarily, even though the leaders and at my school were very supportive, and they'd come in and give me some feedback, and I had my KCTR coach, of course, and so so it was a nurturing environment, but I think I was hard on myself, because I wanted to do the best I could, and I felt like I was really struggling that first year. And so, but in the next year, so I was still teaching fifth grade, but one of my former students sent me this video that she had all these questions. One of the units we teach is about the universe and space and stars. And so she sent me this video with all her questions, and she said, "I know you're teaching other people and you have your baby, but you're still my teacher." And so she's like, "I have questions." And so she just listed out all these questions, and it was really touching. And so I was like, I still got through to them, like they still cared. And so I was hard on myself, but the students had a different perspective. And so I think my advice to teachers in their first year, especially if theirs starts out kind of rough like mine, is to not be too hard on yourself. So try to see, yeah, yourself through the lens of other people a little bit more.
That is great advice there. And again, if you're joining us, if you have any questions for Rita yourself, just toss them in the comment section. I'm trying to monitor that a little bit. I did miss a question last week because I was in the wrong spot. But outside the obvious, scientist to science teacher, what were you able to take from your previous profession into the teaching, to your career as a teacher that you think was valuable?
Yeah, I um most of the science career, or at least in my experience, there are all kinds of different scientists, but you have to have curiosity. You definitely have to have determination. In science, you're literally creating knowledge and maybe a new medicine that didn't exist before, or studying something that people have not yet explained. And that means you come up with a lot of failure. There are things that you think will work that don't, and you have to continuously learn from them and adjust for your next experiment, and just not give up when things are hard or when things are tough. So that definitely helps when you're a teacher, to just kind of always be adjusting and learning, and be okay with things not being perfect the first time or the second time or the third time. And also having just curiosity and passion for what you do, just in general, kind of a love of your expertise, whatever that is, your field, that carries through. And so the more that you show that side of you, that you love science and why, that's kind of infectious. And even if kids, there are a couple that maybe wouldn't normally be that interested in science, but if you're so excited about it, they're kind of like, they get curious too. And so those those two things, I guess, the determination and then just curiosity and kind of a love of science.
That's cool. So I don't know. I think of a scientist. I think of probably just because I see it on TV, like
It
a lot of hours. It just seems like long hours. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you
is.
probably
It
know
is long
better.
hours for
You probably
sure.
know better than me. But however, has the transition into teaching kind of helped balance your? You think it helped balance your personal life more, as far as like, I mean, did it give you more time back to yourself, more time for hobbies, more time with your family, any of those things, or is it about the same?
No, I think it definitely has. And just the in general being feeling more fulfilled makes you a happier person, and then you're better and more energized when you're with your family and your loved ones. Um, so Uh, Yeah, as a scientist, your hours are kind of mine were crazy at least. As I mentioned, like sometimes I was on a true night shift, and so switching between shifts was hard. Coming in for to give some mice medicine, at different like time points at night can be kind of tiring. Um, but as a teacher, there are those I guess traditional perks about having being off for a holiday. Whereas in the science world, for me, if you're working with live animals or with patients, you come in for whatever their needs are. If you need to get a sample or patients coming in on a holiday because that's when they're off of work, that's when you come in and you get that tumor biopsy and you process it. So there really weren't, whether the weather was bad, whether it was a holiday, you might still have to come into the lab. And but as a teacher, you get those days off, and so it's really wonderful because now I can spend it with my husband, and now we have a little baby, and so I can spend it with him and experience his first when he sees the Christmas tree lights come on for the first time. And so there is that. There's definitely, yeah, more. There's some perks to being a teacher. So getting the holidays and the summer, and in the summers, I even still go work at a lab in the summer sometimes. And so I can still have that connection to keep my skills up and my connections in case students want to be scientists, then I could, refer them or get guest speakers in more easily. So you still have that opportunity too. So in the summers, you could still connect with your old life if you would like to.
Actually, that piece right there you just said is pretty cool. The fact that you still had access. I didn't even think about that piece, the access to still, or the networking to be able to call former colleagues or
Hmm.
whatnot, and especially now that we've become experts of the Zoom virtual lifestyles, and probably a lot even easier now to get someone to get on Zoom with your class, kind of
Definitely.
share that experience as a scientist. So that's a pretty cool piece I didn't even think about. So we know specifically because you went through KCTR or whatnot. We know there's a support system in play with KCTR through coaches and your mentor teacher and the like. And of course, within your school, you probably had a support. But how important was it for you, or how important is it, in your opinion, to have a support system as you make the transition from 10 plus year career doing something else to the teacher profession, where like you said, at first year you had some ups and downs, you had the new lifestyle with having an addition in your own family. How important was it for you to have a support system, and what did that look like for you?
Yeah, hugely important. Because even if everything's going great, it's still a big change, and there's some, at least for me, there's a little bit of anxiety with that big change and not knowing what's around the corner. You're doing something that you're not an expert in yet, and so having people there to give you some more perspective is really helpful. The first year in KCTR, um, you're a resident teacher, and so you are in a room of a full-time teacher, and you slowly get more and more responsibility, and then you're teaching students. You might be alone in the room, oh no, and then kind of know um, how to lead a class. And so it's you're not just thrown into the waters. They, as much as possible, try to ease you into more responsibility as a teacher. Hearing the um my mentor teacher, I'm still in contact with her, and so it was really helpful to meet her and other teachers through her. I You also have support from your coach, um and so my current coach is wonderful. She also taught science, so she has that background and that language, and so it's easy to connect with her and explain kind of whatever I need to teach that month. And she just has a unique way of posing questions. And even that first year, there was a time when I was doubting, like, should I be doing this? Am I like should I be in front of kids, like, should I teach older people, or, just, I wasn't, it was hard, and I just wasn't quite sure, is this normal? And so all the teachers are like, yes, it's normal. But if you don't have that support network, then you just have your own head, and so you might kind of just succumb to kind of doubt. But when you have the support network, then you can get different perspective. You can get life stories and career stories from other people, and have that motivation and encouragement to persist, and just kind of grow in your confidence and skills. So yeah, and trying to think the other supports. Depending on your school, we have managers at our school. It's someone in administration who comes in and meets with you and gives you a little bit of feedback. You can practice if there's anything. If something went kind of not as you would have liked one day, they might practice that scenario with you, and you can try kind of wording things in a different way, or having a restorative conversation with the student. You can practice that before you meet with them. You can practice parent calls with them, or they can be in the room with you the first time you do it. So there's really quite a bit of support for me in my experience, and that's all. The more, the better. Obviously, teaching is not for the weak. It's difficult, and you have some very real um, consequences if people are not receiving the education that they need. So there is that love of teaching, but there's also the reality that you're preparing people for to succeed and have careers and things like that. So you need that support network, and the more the better. And KCTR has a lot of support.
What about personally, like within your own family or friends system? What type of support did you have there, and how important was that to you?
Yeah, that's hugely important. So my husband was extremely supportive of the career change, and if I had to work late, or if I was staying up to watch all these different YouTube videos to select the perfect one to show whatever science concept, he was very supportive of that and understanding. My friends. My faith is very important to me, so having my church community group, being able to talk with them about my concerns, or even just have people to celebrate with me if something went really well that day. Those are all things that kind of strengthen your spirit to carry on and make it through hard times. Yeah, it's just like, I suppose you could do it alone, but I found for me that life is much, much better and more enjoyable in community. So absolutely, like, yeah, I need support. So.
That is awesome, man. And thank you again for joining us this evening. If you are just now getting on, this is Vernon, Talent and Placement Manager with KCTR, with Rita, third year, fifth grade science teacher, who was also previously a KCTR resident and now an alumni slash graduate within the program, joining us this evening to talk about her transition from a career as a scientist, with over a decade of experience in that area, to becoming a teacher. And she's been sharing some thoughts and insights this evening about what that looked like for her personally. And we are grateful for her spending time with us this evening as she talks about what that looked like for her personally. And if you have questions for Rita, just drop those in the comment section on the Facebook. And I'm trying to keep up this time, and hopefully if you have one, I'll be able to toss that to her, as we only have a couple of questions left for her personally. So Rita, let's talk about, you've been teaching for 3 years, and you talked about how the fulfillment, you left your previous profession because of a lack of fulfillment. Um, what's your favorite, if you have one, what's your favorite memory thus far in your 3 years as an educator? You might have
um,
more than one, but what's one that kind of like you think about and just you get that smile on your face, and you get those couple of tears dripping down? What comes to mind?
um, I don't know. I mean, so many, just countless ones. There was a time when some students were one student asked to come in and spend more time on an exam if she could work on it over lunch because she hadn't been able to finish it. And so then one of her friends was a student who was kind of struggling, and I was like, hey, bring your friend in too. And so then other students heard about it, and so they all wanted to come in at lunch and like work quietly on their exam. And afterwards, I was just really proud of them because um, they I didn't hadn't shown kind of that hadn't taken to heart kind of that spirit of like excellence and trying really hard. And so that was sort of like a starting point where it just kind of rippled throughout the rest of the year. But at the end of that, we had a little extra time, and I was like, well, you can go to recess. I can write you a pass or, whatever. And they're like, okay, well, can we stay here? And so then they they like taught me different dance moves. And I don't know, we just kind of hung out and talked about, I don't know, just random things like things I had done in the lab. And it was just a really nice, I don't know how long, 10, 15 minutes, not that long, but it was nice to, um, see like the impact of them working hard, but then also get to know them as people, and then have them get to know me as a person and realize that that's a part of teaching as well, and that those moments are just as important as them getting the vocabulary word correct. So, yeah.
I'm glad you said that because you actually reminded me I was supposed to ask a question similar to that. So,
Mm.
what is your top story? What is your top um, scientist related story that you bring into the classroom? Like, what's that one thing that you share that you've done as a scientist where everybody's like, mind is blown?
um, I don't know. I guess kind of two things that come to mind. One is just kind of for the shock factor, but it also relates to um, our, when we're learning about life cycles, when we're learning about the body and all of that. I'm like, did you know that poop has saved someone's life? And they're like, what? That's gross. And I'm like, hold on, listen up. And so then I would tell them this story about this woman who was dying, and she had this bacterial infection that went all over her body, and no medicine would work. And that was it. She was dying. And the doctor called up the husband and said, I have this crazy idea, and it's based on Chinese medicine, and we've done some research in the US, but I want to take your poop and process it and give it to your wife. And this is why. And so he was trying to explain that our bacteria has a huge role in our health, and that hers has been totally, like unbalanced, and that he wants to rebalance it. And the husband and wife talked, and they're like, well, there's no other option. I'm literally dying. My organs are starting to fail. And so the doctor tried this, and it miraculously saved her. Within days, she was, recovering. And so that started this fecal transplant kind of um, phenomenon in our country. And so it was something that I had been able to do a little bit of research on. And now they're looking into it to help with diabetes, to help with, cancers, and just all kinds of things, not just bacterial infections that go out of control. And so that's kind of like a shock factor one, I
And you know
guess.
what? And your students will be telling that story for 20, 30, 40 years because now it's in my head, and I'm going to be dropping that nugget whenever I can just to make myself look even smarter.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of fun stories and facts to tell them.
That is a funny one. So let me ask you this: as we wind down here, and again, if you have questions, drop those in the comment as we finish our time here in this segment of Career Changer Conversations with Rita. Um, you know what? Why was it important for you to go into the education field? Like, why did you find this something that I'm going to leave my 10-year career as a scientist where I save lives, essentially, and probably make really, really good money to say, I want to go teach um, in Kansas City. I'm going to become a teacher. Why?
Yeah. Um, Part of it was just hearing that there was a shortage of teachers. Part of it was um, remembering that a lot of what got me to where I was were my teachers. And so yes, I had that successful career, but then it also felt like, um, I don't know, that it was time to do something different with it. Still do science, but was there a way I could give back more? And um, so I had this desire as a scientist. One of the reasons I went into that field in science was that I wanted to do something that I felt was helping society somehow. I don't really know why that was a drive, but it was something important to my values, I guess. And um, but in the corporate world, a lot of it is driven. It's a business, and so it's driven by making money. And so even if you have a cure or a medicine for a cancer, for instance, in kids, that's really rare. It's not something the company will typically spend money on to produce because it's not cost effective for them. It's millions of dollars to make a medicine, not knowing whether it's going to work perfectly. And so they really want to focus on diseases that lots of people have, like breast cancer, which also need treatment. But that was starting to kind of wear on my soul a little bit. And I was kind of like, well, this isn't really what I signed up for. And so it's there, I don't know, a way that I can still have science and still give back to people and also be around students because I missed that. And that led me to teaching.
That is awesome. So Rita, let's end it here. What piece of advice would you give to someone who was thinking about making the career jump into the teaching profession after doing something 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What's one piece of advice that, through your experience, you think is important enough to share with people?
Hmm. I think one is, excuse me, to really to to do it for you and not other people. So, this is an instance where I think it's okay to really reflect on, do it yourself, because you're the one choosing this life. So if there were a lot of people who kind of pushed back, I feel unfortunately that um, being an educator isn't as respected as it should be. It's so critical for all of us, and yet people say ooh scientist, but they don't say ooh teacher necessarily. And so for me personally, I felt a lot of pushback against going down that career path. But in my heart, I kind of knew that that's where I should be, or where I thought I should be. And so I think that at some point, it's important to talk to people that you trust and kind of work it out with other people. But I think at some point, you need to just um, trust yourself and decide on your own, that if this is something you really want to do, then make it happen. Don't hold back. Um, it is scary to switch from a career that's successful, that you know what you're doing, and to become a beginner again at something. That's definitely intimidating and it's really hard. But it's also kind of an adventure. And so I think if you go to it with a beginner's mind, where you're there to learn and there to grow, instead of getting like, I'm not perfect or I'm failing at X, Y, and Z, um, then I think you'll find it to be really fulfilling and exciting. So you do have to like trust yourself, and you have to enter into it with a beginner's mind. Like everything's new and you're just there to learn.
Rita, thank you very much for your time and your insight this evening. You were excellent. We're thankful. A lot of good stuff there that I think individuals who were watching live, as well as those who will come back and watch it later, will be writing some notes down, because you said some valuable information this evening, some good knowledge share. So we thank you for spending the time with us this year and taking the pledge and trying something different with us. This is something we just came up with last month, and so far I think we're 2 for 2 in the success rate of this evening. So we thank you, and we thank you all who joined us via our Facebook Live page with KCTR, and those who will watch later for helping making this a success. So we will continue to do this. Join us next Wednesday as we have Ramsey Self join us for our third installment of Career Changer Conversation. And we hope you enjoy it. We hope you took a lot away from this, and have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.